My name is Daniel Harris. I'm 45 years old, and I've lived in Willow Creek, Oregon, most of my life. If you blink driving through, you'd probably miss it. One blinking yellow light at the main intersection. One grocery store. One high school. And more pine trees than people. The kind of town where your neighbors still wave at you from their porch swing. But they also know exactly how long your wife's car has been parked at someone else's house. Whether they say anything or not. I grew up here. My dad was a carpenter, the kind who always smelled like sawdust and coffee. And my mom worked at the post office until she slipped on the ice one winter and had to retire early. They never had much, but they always had each other, and for a long time I thought that was just how love worked. You find a person, you build a life, and you stay. I held on to that idea longer than I should have. I met Sarah 9 years ago at a mutual friend's housewarming party in Bend. I wasn't even going to go. I had just gotten out of something messy, and the idea of making small talk while holding a lukewarm beer sounded like torture. But I went anyway. She was standing by the kitchen island, laughing at something I hadn't heard, dressed in a forest green sweater and jeans, sipping wine like she had nowhere else to be. There was something easy about her, something calm, and I think, looking back, that's what pulled me in. I'd had enough chaos. We dated for a year. Nothing whirlwind. No grand gestures. Just dinners and dog walks and long drives up to the coast. A comfortable sort of love. She was practical, smart, funny in a dry way. We didn't fight much in those early days. We didn't dig too deep either. We got married in my parents' backyard under a row of string lights and a too bright September sun. My dad built the arch we stood under. Sarah wore off-white and bare feet, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is how you know something's right, you don't have to question it. 8 years later, we had a house with an attached garage, a backyard big enough for a garden she never kept up with, and a chocolate lab named Murphy who liked to bark at the garbage truck like it was personally offending him. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Sarah worked as a brand manager for a skincare company that let her work remotely 3 days a week, and I was in regional sales for a construction supply chain out of Portland. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the mortgage and then some. From the outside looking in, we were a portrait of suburban contentment. People saw our social media posts. Smiling selfies at the lake, Murphy in his Christmas sweater, the date night pictures with 2 wine glasses clinking, and thought we had it all figured out. But people only show you what they want you to see. That's the thing about calmness. Sometimes it's peace, and sometimes it's pressure held in so tight, no one sees the cracks until something breaks. Inside the house, things had shifted. It wasn't overnight. That's what makes it hard to explain. There wasn't one blow-up argument or one big betrayal, not at first, anyway. It was quieter than that. More like erosion. A pulling away that happened so slowly you didn't notice until there was space between you that used to be filled with laughter. Conversations that used to last hours turned into updates about bills and calendars. She started going to bed earlier, or I stayed up later. We were still polite. Still said good morning and drive safe. But there's a kind of loneliness that hits different when it's happening in a room where the other person is sitting right next to you. We tried things. Little fixes. Let's cook together more. Maybe a weekend trip would help. We even got a couple's massage package once, which felt more like parallel therapy with scented oils than anything in ** mate. But nothing really worked. The distance kept growing, and neither of us wanted to be the one to point at it and say, "What happened to us?" I'll admit, I wasn't always present. Work was demanding. I'd leave early, get home late. There were stretches where I lived on hotel coffee and fast food. Sarah used to tease me about it, but eventually she just stopped asking. I guess I thought she understood, that we were building something together, and that meant sacrificing comfort for stability sometimes. But maybe she wanted something else. Maybe she stopped waiting for me to figure that out. Still, I never thought she would leave. Or stray. Sarah wasn't reckless. She was calculated, measured. The kind of woman who organized the spice rack alphabetically and made backup grocery lists. If something was bothering her, she wrote it down in a planner, not blurted it out in the middle of a fight. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She just got quiet. And I didn't realize how dangerous that kind of silence could be. Looking back, I wonder how many of my friends saw it coming before I did. Willow Creek's not the kind of town where people confront you directly. Instead, they give you that long pause after asking how things are, or that awkward smile when you say, "We're doing fine." They talk about you in the produce aisle or at the dog park but won't say a word to your face. Maybe I was blind. Or maybe I didn't want to look too closely because deep down I already knew. I remember one evening, probably 6 months before everything cracked. I came home to find Sarah sitting on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, just staring out into the trees. Murphy was lying next to her, twitching in his sleep. I asked her what she was thinking about, and she said, "Nothing really." I believed her at the time. Now I think that silence said more than anything she could have told me. We never had kids. Not because we couldn't, but because we kept waiting for the right time. At first it was, "Let's travel more." And then it was, "Let's get our finances in a better place." And eventually it became, "Maybe we're just not those people." I think we both quietly grieved that choice, though neither of us admitted it. The house felt too big sometimes, too quiet, and sometimes I wondered if Sarah felt forgotten in it. I tell myself things were just going through a phase, that all couples had dry spells, that love shifts and that's okay. But I was lying to myself. The truth was we weren't partners anymore. We were roommates with shared history and separate emotional addresses. And yet, if you had asked me then, I would have said I was happy. Or at least not unhappy. I still made her coffee in the morning. She still kissed my cheek before bed. We still went to church on Sundays and hosted game night every other Friday. I told myself those things mattered. I told myself they were proof we were still okay. But sometimes what you don't see is louder than what you do. The way she started locking her phone. The way she laughed too hard at texts she wouldn't show me. The new cologne in the air when I got home late. Tiny details, each one small enough to ignore. But together, they whispered something I wasn't ready to hear. Life in Willow Creek kept moving around us. The seasons changed. The leaves fell. The snow came. The daffodils bloomed again. We smiled at neighbors, waved at mailmen, made polite conversation at the grocery store. And behind our closed door, something was quietly coming undone. No one noticed. Or maybe they did. But in a town like ours, everyone minds their own business until they don't. It was mid-October when I came back early from a business trip to Portland. The plan had been to stay overnight after a supplier meeting, but the client canceled last minute. So I packed up, grabbed a coffee, and hit the road around 3 p.m. I figured I'd surprise Sarah. Maybe bring takeout, pop open a bottle of wine, try to break the weird rhythm we'd fallen into lately. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the pines when I pulled into our driveway. Murphy barked once from inside. He always did that when he heard my car. Just one bark, like he was letting everyone know the man of the house was home. It used to make me smile. This time it felt like a jolt. Like something was off before I even walked through the door. I stepped inside and immediately noticed it. The smell. Not a bad smell. Not a rotten one. But unfamiliar. Sharp. Sweet in an artificial sort of way. Cologne I didn't recognize. It wasn't mine. Mine was earthy, subtle. The same one I'd worn for years. This was louder, like it had been sprayed too generously in a hurry. It clung to the air, heavy in the hallway, strongest near the stairs. "Sarah?" I called out. No answer. Murphy came trotting over, tail wagging, a little sleepy. He wasn't acting strange, just happy I was home. But the quiet in the house felt unnatural. There was no music playing, no TV, no sound of Sarah moving around. Just silence and that scent, hovering like a presence that didn't belong. I walked upstairs slowly. When I reached the bedroom, I stopped. The door was half open, and right away I saw it. Her blouse, a silky, deep red one she usually saved for nicer occasions, draped over the edge of the armchair like it had been tossed in a rush. Her bra was underneath it, half wrapped in the fabric like someone had been in a hurry. And then I saw the belt. A man's belt. Black leather. Not mine. Not even close to mine. It was hanging over the side of the chair like a snake that had slithered off and forgotten where it came from. I picked it up slowly, like it might burn me. It was expensive, stitched detailing gold buckle. The kind of belt someone wears when they're trying to impress. And in that moment, something inside me just went still. Not panic, not anger, just this bone-deep awareness that I was standing in a version of my life that didn't make sense anymore. I heard the front door open downstairs. Her voice floated up a second later. "Murph, hey buddy." Footsteps. She came around the corner, a paper bag in one hand, takeout from that Thai place downtown. She paused when she saw me in the doorway. Her eyes dropped immediately to the belt in my hands. To her credit, she didn't flinch. She didn't stutter. "Oh," she said too casually. Yeah, that's from work." I said nothing, just looked at her. She smiled, a tight, performative little thing, and set the bag on the dresser. One of the guys from marketing needed a quick wardrobe change before the shoot. I told him he could use the upstairs bathroom to freshen up. I kept staring. She nodded toward the belt. He must have forgotten it. I meant to put it aside. I wanted to ask, why would a man be changing clothes in our bedroom? Not the guest bathroom. Not the downstairs one. Why here? But I didn't say anything. I just held her gaze. She leaned against the dresser, arms crossed, still playing calm. They were doing Hedge*TS for the new catalog, and one of the guys got Thai with me afterward. I offered him a ride, and he needed to swap shirts. No big deal. Her tone was smooth. Too smooth. Rehearsed. Like she'd run through the story already, twice in the mirror, once on the drive home. I set the belt down slowly on the chair. "That's convenient," I said, my voice low. She shrugged. "I know it sounds weird, but it's true." I nodded. We didn't talk much over dinner. She asked about my meeting. I told her it got canceled. She pretended to be surprised, made a little joke about my long drives for nothing. I asked her how the photo shoot went, and she gave me names I didn't recognize and details I didn't remember 5 minutes later. The entire conversation felt like reading from a script, like both of us were trying to keep the scene from slipping off the rails. After dinner, she went upstairs to finish some emails. I stayed on the couch, watching the kind of mindless sitcom I normally wouldn't waste 10 minutes on, but I needed the noise. I kept thinking about that belt, how out of place it looked in our room, how perfectly that lie had rolled off her tongue. Sarah had always been good at appearances. Even in our worst arguments, she could keep her voice calm, her hands folded. But I saw something in her eyes that night, just a flicker, a flash of fear, or guilt. I tried to let it go, told myself I was overthinking it, that I was being insecure, that maybe I was just tired, maybe work was getting to me, maybe I missed a detail and everything she said was true. But that smell, that cologne, it stuck with me. Even after she'd lit a candle in the room, even after I'd changed the sheets. I could still smell it in the hallway for days after, like it had settled into the air, into the walls, like the house was trying to tell me something I didn't want to hear. The next few days I noticed things, small things. Her phone stayed glued to her side, always face down. She'd step into another room to answer calls. She changed her passwords, started going to the gym more regularly, said it was for stress. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the distance between us started to feel more intentional. Like she was putting space between us, little by little, to make the fall easier when it finally came. One morning, I reached over in bed and realized she wasn't there. The clock read 5:17 a.m. I found her downstairs in her robe, sipping coffee at the kitchen table, staring out the window. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. She jumped a little, then nodded. "Just a lot on my mind." "Work?" She shrugged. "Life." I made us both toast. She barely touched hers. That Sunday, she skipped church, said she had a migraine. I went alone. Our usual seat near the back pew felt like it was missing more than just one body. I don't know why I didn't confront her. Maybe I was scared of what I'd hear. Maybe I thought if I waited long enough, she'd come to me. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to admit what my gut already knew. Because deep down I did know. The signs weren't just there. They were practically waving flags. I remember lying in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, listening to her soft breathing beside me. My chest felt tight, Not from anger, but from grief. Because when you love someone, you start to memorize the details. How they hold their coffee mug, the sound of their laugh, the way they say your name when they're tired. And when those things start to change, you feel it in your bones. Sarah wasn't saying my name the same way anymore. She said it like it had weight, like it carried something she wasn't ready to unpack. And I couldn't help but wonder who she was saying someone else's name to, with that smile I hadn't seen in months. It was a Thursday evening when everything clicked into place. I remember it because the clouds were just starting to roll in over the mountains, casting that soft blue-gray light across the street. One of those calm, moody evenings where you feel like something's about to happen, even if you don't know what. Sarah had told me earlier in the week that she had a client dinner. Marketing outreach, she'd said, like it was a term I was supposed to understand without question. Apparently, she and 2 team members were meeting a couple from out of town who ran a wellness brand they were trying to partner with. She wore a navy dress I hadn't seen in a while, low back, fitted, and heels that hadn't made an appearance since our anniversary 2 years ago. I told her she looked nice, and she kissed me on the cheek with a distracted smile before heading out the door. She didn't offer where they were going, but I knew. She'd left the reservation card on the kitchen counter the day before, by accident I assumed. It was a small bistro tucked near the edge of downtown, a cozy, upscale place with white string lights in the windows and brick walls inside. The kind of place we used to go on special occasions when we were still trying. I don't know what possessed me to go. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I was tired of guessing. Or maybe, deep down, I already knew and needed to see it for myself. Needed proof to extinguish the last flickers of denial still clinging to me like cobwebs. I didn't rush. I waited until after 7:30, then drove slowly. I told myself I wasn't going to confront her, that I wasn't going to cause a scene. I just wanted to see, just wanted to know. I parked across the street, 2 spots down from the bakery. From where I sat in the car, I had a direct view through the front window of the restaurant. Tables were half full, warm yellow light spilling out into the early evening. A violin track played from inside, muffled by the glass. It looked peaceful, until I saw her, Sarah, sitting at a small table by the window, not with a group, not with 2 colleagues and a client couple, just her and one man. He was in a tailored charcoal suit, the kind that says I care what you think of me. Dark hair, short beard, and that relaxed posture that men wear when they feel entitled to the space around them. I watched as he leaned in across the table, smiling. And then, as if the universe wanted to leave no doubt, I saw it. His hand reached across the table and landed gently on top of hers. Not an accidental graze. Not professional. This was int asterisk Macy. I froze. The kind of stillness where your brain hasn't caught up with your eyes. Like you've stepped out of your body and are watching the moment from above. Like it's happening to someone else. Then it all clicked. Like dominoes toppling over in my head. The belt. The smell. The gym obsession. The distance. The phone turned face down. The perfectly timed migraines. The client meetings. All of it. Every loose thread I'd been tugging at for weeks finally unraveled at once. And the truth stood there, naked and plain. She was cheating on me. There was no dramatic reaction. No yelling. No smashing fists against the steering wheel. Just a kind of quiet collapse inside. A folding in. Like the final puzzle piece sliding into place. Not satisfying, but inevitable. I don't remember driving away. One minute I was staring through that glass window at the woman I married holding another man's hand, and the next, I was parked in an empty lot near the river, engine off, the only sound the soft ticking of the cooling car and the rush of water in the distance. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat there with my hands in my lap, palms up like I was waiting for something. An answer. Maybe. A sign. But nothing came. Just the cold realization that my marriage, the thing I had tried so hard to keep alive, was already gone. She'd left me in her heart months ago. All I'd done tonight was catch up. I thought about going home, confronting her, waiting at the kitchen table like they do in movies. Who is he? I'd ask. How long has it been? But I knew how that would go. I'd get the same polished lines, the same calm performance, maybe even a few tears, maybe not. Either way, I wouldn't get the truth. I get damage control. And I didn't want damage control. I wanted clarity. So I gave her something else. I turned the car around, drove home, and slipped off my wedding ring the second I stepped through the door. My hand felt lighter immediately. Foreign. Like I was touching a future I hadn't prepared for. I sat down at the dining room table, placed the ring gently on the wooden surface, and just looked at it. That tiny band had carried so much weight, so many hopes, so many quiet compromises. And now it was just metal. That night I didn't sleep in our bed. I crashed on the couch, still dressed. Murphy curled up next to me like he knew something was wrong. Dogs always know. He rested his head on my thigh, warm and heavy, like he was saying, "I'm here. You're not alone." The next morning, I left the house early, before she came downstairs. Drove until I found a small breakfast diner on the highway. Sat in a booth with burnt coffee and a cracked menu, surrounded by the clatter of forks and the quiet hum of other people's normal lives. I watched couples talk about the weather and weekend plans, and I felt like I was watching a different species. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Dinner went late. Hope you didn't wait up. Love you. Love you." Those words used to mean something. Now they felt like muscle memory, like a magician's flourish after the trick is already done. It wasn't love. Not anymore. At least not the kind you could trust. Not the kind you could sleep beside at night without wondering who they were dreaming about. When I finally did go home, she was still asleep. I showered, dressed, and went back out. I didn't talk to her that day, or the next. She didn't press. Maybe she thought I was moody. Maybe she felt the shift and pretended not to. A few days later, I made a decision. I called the restaurant, asked to speak to the manager, told him I had a strange request. Next time a woman comes in, long dark hair, usually wears navy or gray, sometimes comes with a man in a suit. Could you give her this when she arrives? I paused, then added, only if she's with him, not if she's alone. There was silence on the line. Then a hesitant, sure, I guess I can do that. I drove over a few hours later, handed the man a small envelope with my wedding ring sealed inside. She'll know what it means, I told him. The next night, she left for another meeting. An hour later, I got a text from a friend who worked downtown. Dude, I just saw Sarah at Riva's. Waiter walked up and put a ring on her table. Her face went white. That was all he said. But it was enough. That moment, her face changing, the lie unraveling, the illusion cracking wide open in public, was the moment I stopped feeling powerless. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't accuse. I just returned the symbol of our marriage to the same table where she'd betrayed it. And somehow, that felt louder than anything I could have said. After I left that ring at the restaurant, I didn't go home. I didn't even have a plan. I got in the car and drove. No direction, no destination. Just followed the road as it curved out of downtown and into the thinning edge of the woods, where streetlights gave up and the sky pressed in close. It was almost midnight by then. I passed the gas station we used to stop at on the way to the lake, the one where Sarah always picked the off-brand cherry gum I never understood. I passed the boarded-up diner where we once fought for an hour over whether to spend Christmas with my parents or hers. Funny how even the bad memories seem softer when you know they're over. Eventually, I pulled off the highway and parked behind a rundown motel. One of those places you never notice until you need somewhere to disappear. Faded sign. Vacancy light flickering like it was embarrassed to be still working. I went inside, asked the night clerk for a room. He didn't even look up, just slid a keycard across the counter and said, "Checkout's at 11. The room smelled like bleach and old wallpaper, the kind of place with lamps that buzz and pillows that feel like folded towels. But I didn't care. I needed distance more than comfort. I turned off my phone, just powered it down and slid it face down on the bedside table like it was dangerous. And maybe it was. I didn't want to see her name. Didn't want to read whatever carefully worded message she might have sent after the ring showed up at her dinner table. I didn't want an explanation. I wanted silence. The truth is, silence was easier to manage than hope. I sat at the edge of the bed for a long time, elbows on my knees, just breathing. trying to remember who I was before I got married. Before Sarah. Before this version of my life became the only version I knew. I couldn't find him. That man, whoever he was, felt far away, like an actor I'd watched once in a film I never finished. Eventually, I moved to the small desk in the corner. One of those motel desks with a single drawer and a pen that barely works. I pulled out the notepad and just started writing. At first, I didn't know what I was writing. Just thoughts, phrases, fragments of questions I hadn't been able to ask out loud. When did it start? Was I ever enough? Why didn't I listen to my gut the first time? How long have I been lying to myself? I filled 5 pages before I even looked up. And then I flipped the notepad and started a new list. Signs I ignored. The phone always on silent. The gym sessions that lasted 2 hours but never made her sore. Her sudden obsession with privacy. That fake laugh when I asked who she was texting. The man's belt in our bedroom. The cologne in the hallway. Work dinners where no work ever came up afterward. The way she flinched when I reached for her hand in public. Her eyes drifting over my shoulder during conversations. Each one hit like a slow punch to the chest. Not because they were new, but because I'd seen every one of them as they happened and chose to look away. Chose to believe that love was stronger than suspicion. But love, real love, doesn't need you to doubt your instincts. By the time the sun cracked over the horizon, I'd written 37 things. 37 red flags. And those were just the ones I could remember. I don't know if I slept that night. Maybe I drifted for an hour here or there. But mostly I just sat with it all. The betrayal. The grief. The numbness that sets in when you realize you've been holding on to a version of someone that doesn't exist anymore. In the morning, I showered and changed into the same clothes. I didn't even bother checking out. I just left the key on the desk and walked out. Still no phone. Still not ready. I drove to the overlook where we used to watch thunderstorms. It's a bluff just outside of Willow Creek, where the trees thin and the sky opens wide. Sarah used to bring her camera there and try to catch lightning strikes. She never caught one. Always said she liked the trying more than the success. I stood there for a long time, arms crossed, jacket pulled tight against the wind, just looking out over the hills. And then, for reasons I still don't fully understand, I started talking. Out loud. To no one. I'm not angry, I said. And I wasn't. Not really. The anger had burned itself out somewhere in the middle of the night. I'm just tired. That was the truth. Tired of pretending. Tired of feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. Tired of trying to read between lines that shouldn't exist in the first place. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want answers. I just wanted out of the fog. I turned my phone on around noon. It exploded with notifications. 12 missed calls. 7 texts. 3 voicemails. Sarah? Can we talk? Sarah? Please. Sarah? I don't know what that was supposed to mean, but you didn't have to humiliate me. Sarah? At least give me a chance to explain. Sarah? You're being cruel. Sarah? This isn't like you. Sarah? I'm scared. I didn't reply. I didn't listen to the voicemails either. I deleted them, not because I didn't care, but because I knew every word would be a carefully sharpened hook, designed to pull me back in with just enough pain, just enough sweetness. She'd always been good at saying the right things, but I couldn't afford to believe her anymore. Instead, I called Jake, an old friend from high school. He had a guest house out on the east side of town, near the woods. I helped him build it 6 years ago when he got divorced. You okay? He asked after the 3rd ring. No, I said, but I'm ready to get out. He didn't ask for details, just said, it's yours. Come by whenever. I drove straight there. The guest house was small. 1 bedroom, little kitchen, worn-out couch. But it had walls that didn't carry echoes of broken promises. That was enough. I stayed there that night. Jake brought over groceries and a bottle of whiskey. We didn't talk about Sarah. We didn't talk about much at all. Just sat on the porch and watched the trees sway. That silence was different. Not heavy. Not hollow. Just quiet. Peaceful. And that's when I realized Sometimes the first step after betrayal isn't rage or confrontation or therapy. Sometimes it's just removing yourself from the lie, stepping away, breathing again, letting the stillness in not as an absence but as a beginning. The guest house had no TV, no Wi-Fi, and barely enough hot water to finish a proper shower. But it had silence. And at that point, silence was the most honest thing I'd felt in weeks. Jake had stocked the fridge with the basics: eggs, milk, beer, and a loaf of bread that was already 2 days past its sell-by. He left me a spare set of keys and a note that just said, "Stay as long as you need. You're not alone." I didn't respond, but I folded the note and put it in my wallet. The first night there, I didn't sleep much. I lay on the pull-out sofa, staring at the ceiling with the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that doesn't come from physical effort, but from emotional hemorrhaging. You don't feel it all at once. It comes in waves. At first, you're just numb. Then, slowly, it starts to land. The next morning, I made coffee in the dented old percolator, then sat outside on the porch steps with a blanket around my shoulders and Murphy curled up at my feet. I had brought him with me. Sarah didn't argue. He was mine before we were ever a we. She never really bonded with him anyway. The air smelled like damp pine and soil, like something clean was trying to push its way back into my life. My phone buzzed on the wooden railing. Again. Another message from Sarah. I'd stopped opening them. I knew the rhythm by then. Denial, guilt, anger, apology, repeat. Her texts were like static, constant, insistent, meaningless after a while. I kept the phone on in case my parents called, or Jake needed something. But otherwise, it stayed on Do Not Disturb. I wasn't ready to hear her voice. I wasn't ready to hear her rewrite the timeline, or minimize what happened, or try to wrap her betrayal in therapy speak and hope it would land softer. Instead, I opened my notebook, the same one from the motel. This time, I made a new list different from the list of red flags. Things I missed about who we used to be. Sunday mornings with the windows open, her hair messy and her feet cold against my leg. The way we'd look at each other across a crowded room and know exactly what the other was thinking. Late-night grocery runs just because we both suddenly wanted ice cream. Her singing off-key while folding laundry. Falling asleep to the sound of her breathing. I only wrote 5 before I stopped. Because by the end of the 5th one, I realized something. None of those moments had existed for a long time. They weren't things I missed about her now. They were things I missed about before. About a version of us that had faded pixel by pixel, while I kept pretending we were still in high resolution. That night, I took out every sign I'd ignored, the 37 red flags, and copied them onto new pages. One by one, slower this time, letting each one sink in. This wasn't a story about one dinner with one man. It was a pattern, a carefully assembled web of choices, each one small enough to excuse on its own, but together undeniable. She didn't trip and fall into an affair. She walked there, step by step, deliberate, and I had handed her my trust like it was invincible. That realization hit harder than the affair itself. Because betrayal isn't just about what someone does to you. It's about what they teach you to do to yourself, to question your instincts, to gaslight your gut, to convince yourself that being reasonable means being blind. The next morning, I packed up some laundry and drove into town. I needed to do something normal, something human. There's a laundromat on the north side, tucked between an antique shop and a bait store. Same one I used to go to before I moved in with Sarah. The machine rattled louder than I remembered. I sat in the plastic chair by the window, watching the spin cycle blur my shirts into a storm of fabric, and thought about the last 8 years. Not just the good or the bad, but the things in between. The slow unraveling. The way we stopped looking each other in the eyes when we said, "I love you." The way everything became so transactional. Divvying up chores, coordinating schedules, speaking like co-managers instead of partners. We'd been drifting long before her affair. She just jumped ship first. That night, I went back to the guest house and pulled out the old photo album Sarah and I made during our first year. Back when we printed photos instead of just scrolling past them. There we were in front of the redwood trees, in front of the cabin with the broken heater, at that seafood shack by the pier, both of us laughing mid-bite. We looked happy. Not posed happy, but real happy. I stared at one picture in particular. Sarah with her feet in the water, looking back over her shoulder at me, hair wind-whipped and eyes squinting in the sun. She looked young. So did I. And for a moment, I missed her so much I thought my chest might cave in. Not the woman I'd been living with for the last year. Not the woman who lied to my face with practiced grace. But her, the one in that photo. The one who hadn't walked away yet. But you can't unring a bell. And you can't love someone back into who they used to be. So I closed the album and put it back in the box. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I realized I wasn't looking for a way back. I was trying to figure out how to move forward. A few days later, I started to let people in. I told my brother. Told him everything. He didn't say much at first. Just listened, nodding slowly. Eyes narrowed in that way he does when he's trying not to explode. Eventually, he said, "You didn't deserve that, Dan." And for the first time, I let that truth in. Not just heard it. Believed it. I didn't deserve it. Not the gaslighting. Not the double life. Not the emotional whiplash of being told "I love you" by someone already halfway out the door. Later that week, I made a list titled, "What I Still Have," my health, my dog, my work, friends who show up, place to stay, time, honesty, a future I can choose for myself. That list was shorter than the others, but it was mine, and it wasn't built on lies. By then, the messages from Sarah had slowed. Her last one just said, "You've gone quiet." I don't know what that means. I still want to talk. I didn't respond. I didn't block her either. I wasn't trying to win anything. I just didn't owe her the comfort of access. This part of the story. It was mine, not hers, and I was going to live it on my own terms. I went back to the house after a week. Sarah was waiting, makeup-free, tired eyes, wringing her hands like a teenager caught sneaking out. She begged to explain, promised change, said she still loved me. I looked around the house, the photos, the kitchen, the couch we once picked out together. And I said, "I'm not angry. I'm just tired." Then I packed a bag. Her voice trembled behind me, but I didn't turn back. I had nothing left to rescue. Weeks later, I found a letter. Her handwriting. She admitted it all, how it started, why she let it continue, how she justified the damage.